Hey guys, thank you for clicking on the video and watching a video about Called Hire Studios. You're probably sitting there wondering right now, what is Called Hire Studios? The on-paper answer and the short answer is we're the world's first Christian-owned, fan-owned, faith-based movie studio. But what does that really mean? You know, a lot of people don't really understand. And before I answer that question, I think it's really important to maybe answer the question of why we exist. Because I think that's a really important thing to cover. And to dig into that, you know, maybe you need to find out, you know, who are some of the people behind it. So, like I said, my name is Jason Brown. I am one of the founders of Called Hire Studios. I'm also the president of Called Hire Studios, and you know, I love Called Hire Studios with all my heart. You know, to tell you a little bit about me, I grew up in a small town in North Alabama. My father was military, spent over 30 years in the Army, and spent 5 years in Vietnam. My mom is from Saigon and is Vietnamese. He brought her over in the war, and that was just a really different time for anyone who really understands that war and what those soldiers dealt with when they came home. A lot of PTSD, you know, a lot of effects of a close combat war, you know, not to mention that at that time, you know, the soldiers came home, and a lot of people in America, you know, didn't really give them respect because it was a war that divided the country. And so, you know, there were just a lot of things that that were around that scenario. And so that's what I grew up in. You know, my parents got divorced at a young age. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I think a lot of that had to do with, you know, the things that they had to deal with. You know, my dad struggled with alcohol and PTSD. My mom, you know, coming to a new country as an immigrant. You know, a lot of people, Latinos, Chinese, Vietnamese, a lot of immigrants can understand. You know, we can't. A lot of people that are born here can't understand, but coming here to this country and not knowing anyone, not knowing the language, not knowing what you're going to do can be very scary. And so, you know, when my parents got divorced, it fell on my mother to go and to create something and to provide for me and my brother and my sister. And, you know, that put a lot of struggle on her. And so a lot of times my parents, you know, could be abusive, verbally, sometimes physically, but not because they were bad people. You know, what I've learned in my life is that hurt people. And, you know, when my father was dealing with his issues, and when my mother was dealing with her issues, you know, it was just something that, a way that they were unhealthy in dealing with their issues. And I didn't really understand that as a young age, but I understand it today as an older man, and it gives me perspective on how to live my life and how to deal and treat other people. And so, you know, one of the great things about growing up in North Alabama was that my mother, even though she was gone from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. trying to build a jewelry store, and she started selling jewelry out of the back of her car. That's how dedicated she was to try to provide for her family. But that kind of left me on my own for a little while growing up. But, you know, God pursued me, and my mother always took us to church. And so, you know, growing up in North Alabama in an unstable home, you know, church was a stable environment. And even though I didn't really understand what was going on, it was something that was normal to a certain extent. You know, the groups that I became a part of in youth group and things of that nature, they were stable, the same faces, you know, people who were trying to pour into me. And so that was something that God laid in my path that was phenomenal. And I can't thank my mom and my dad for encouraging me to go when I was little. And I ended up at a church camp called Cross Point. If you're my age, you may know what it is. I wish it still existed today, but it was a sports-based church camp. And, you know, people would go there, young kids would go, and it was a 4 or 5 day camp, and you would pick 2 sports, and you would learn about that sport in the day, and then in the evening, and coaches would teach you, and you'd play games. And then at nighttime and during the day, they would do Bible studies and worship. And it was one of the greatest things that I ever had a chance to attend. And when I was 12 years old, there was a gentleman who spoke. I can't remember if he had cerebral palsy or something, but he had a physical challenge, but he was such a powerful speaker, and his name was Tim. And so when I was 12 years old, Tim led me to Christ. In that audience, I asked God and Jesus to come into my heart, and, you know, that set me on a journey. I wish that I could say that, on that night everything changed, and, everything was great and I was on fire, and, I became a pastor, but that's not true. I came home to my normal life, and, I came home to my normal life, and, the lights popped off here. But a lot of the things that I dealt with as a child kind of crept up in my life. And so what happened was, I acted out. And so through high school and college, drugs and alcohol and things, I tried to fill a God-shaped hole in my heart with things of the world. And, God just sat patiently and waited for me to try all those things. And, eventually he kept whispering in my ear and kept calling me. And so, one thing that he did do when I was very, very small is my stepdad, later after my mom remarried, when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, he would work out of town and he would come home every Friday, and during the weekends he would bring a bag full of VHS tapes. And so he introduced me to movies, and so I would watch movies all week. When my mom would drop me off at school, I would come home, she would be there for 3 or 4 hours. I would make a pile on the floor and I would watch movie after movie after movie, whether they were westerns or kung fu movies or the Karate Kid or sci-fi, you name it, I probably watched it, when I was little. And that was my escape. I could be those characters, and I fell in love with TV and I fell in love with film simply because, that was my escape. The great thing about films is they taught me things, some good things and some bad things, but, a lot of those characters taught me about honesty and character and how to persevere and how to go through challenges. And so those were the things that were teaching me, as I was a child when my mother was away. And, I fell in love with movies. And so God put that in my heart at a young age. After high school and college, I ended up moving to Los Angeles, and I became a PA, which is a production assistant. For many of you in the industry, that is the lowest person on the totem pole. And I would show up to work, the first person there and the last person to leave, picking up trash. But I really, really got a chance to work for some great companies. I worked for Disney and CBS and a lot of other companies as a PA on their productions, and I really got to see the movie making and filmmaking process, and it made me fall in love with it even more. And so because of that, I ended up going to film school. I graduated valedictorian, woohoo, thanks to my teachers, and I ended up producing a few movies. And so, my first movie, we're very blessed, and it ended up on Netflix and distributed through some retailers, big box retailers like Walmart. And then my last movie, Finding Harmony, just came out and started hitting film festivals, and that stars Clint Eastwood's daughter, Allison Eastwood, and Billy Zane from Titanic. Any of you know those guys. But those were great experiences. But at the end of the day, it wasn't fulfilling. And so I ended up doing some other things, and God always whispered in my heart, something that he wanted me to do. And so, that's kind of my journey into filmmaking. And, I guess that's a long way to segue into the question of why does Called Hire exist? And the reason is, because, God wouldn't stop calling me to do something. And so I'm very passionate about movies, and, we believe that we can change the world, we can change culture, through film and through television. We believe that we can teach families and children through movies and television, those characters. We believe that God's calling other people that may be like myself or other founders or people that we incorporate ourselves and surround ourselves with, who love film and television, and they want to do more, and they feel called higher. At the end of the day, I personally feel like God is calling a group out there, a group of people just like you, who want to be part of our community and be part of our family to build something amazing. We also believe that a community and a family that God builds is a very, very, very powerful tool in our industry and a very powerful tool in our culture. And at the end of the day, Called Hire Studios exist to get in the fight. There's no shortage of companies out there that are making content that goes on YouTube or that goes through the distribution channel that teaches our children and our families principles that are not aligned, with the way we believe, that we should be aligned. And so, our job, we want to get into the fight at the end of the day. I want to provide something. We want to provide something. Called Hire Studios wants to provide something. We believe that there are people out there that want to provide something to our families and our kids that they can consume, that teaches them about Christ and the way to live, and the things that He taught us. In Proverbs it tells us to train up a child, and when they're older they'll never depart. And so that's something that's very, very near and dear to our heart. So Called Hire Studios exists to do that. If you want to learn a little more about how it's structured, watch the video entitled "Is This Ownership or Is This a Donation?" And if that intrigues you, then you can go on over to the video that says "How Involved Can I Be?" Because the way that Called Hire is structured, the family and the fans have a chance to actually own the studio along with us. And so that means helping us source material and making the films and picking actors and helping us market at film festivals and distribute, and you actually have an opportunity to share in the profits. And so if that sounds interesting to you, and you love film and you love television, you love movies, and you just want to be a part of it, then watch those videos and just learn a little bit more. Follow us on our social media channels, and you can start interacting with us and learning a little more about us and understanding who we are. And then definitely sign up for our email newsletter. If you sign up for that newsletter, then you're going to get all the updates on when all this happens, when the round launches, and when we get qualified by the SEC and things of that nature. And so that's it. So that's why Called Hire Studios exist. I hope I did a good job in explaining that at the end of the day, our core values, our number one core value is just to reflect and honor and worship Christ. So everything that we do, that's what it's for. When we make movies, it's to go and serve other people, and through that. And so, that's what this whole thing is about. And so we're asking people to learn about us. And if you feel the same way and you feel like, there's a connection between what we believe and our mission and what we're going to go do and what we're building, then, find a way to get involved. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, and God bless. Thanks.